Special Education Advisory Committee for April 2nd, 2019. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that today is Autism Awareness Month. The day is aimed at encouraging member states of the United Nations to take measure to raise awareness about people with autistic syndrome disorders throughout the world. And for this year, 2019, the theme is Assistive Technologies and Active Participation. Okay. So we'll begin with approval of the agenda. Did everybody have a chance to take a look? Are there any questions or comments? Any additions? Okay. So we'll call that approved. Do we take a vote or show hands? Lisa? Do you want to move the approval? Okay. And seconded by Diane?
We did at one point, yeah. So.
All right.
Motion to approve.
So motion to approve the agenda, and so moved. Okay. Now for the minutes from our March 5th meeting, are there any questions or comments, omissions?
Well, good.
No? We're good? Okay, motion to approve the minutes. Yep, and seconded by, oh, sorry, you have a question, yeah.
Sorry, Deirdre, can you use the mic?
Sorry.
Is it on? You push the button, it'll light up.
Yeah, just
Push
press it.
Oh, sorry, I was holding it down. Just questions regarding from the public. I see that it's been changed to email only. Is there a reason why we're not allowing the public to question us when we're in?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and actually our agenda item 1.4 is going to address that. We can hold on.
Thank you.
Okay. So motion to approve the minutes by Christina and seconded by Desiree. Deidre. Okay, and all in favor? Great, approved. All right, moving on. Item 1.4. And here we thought it would be a good idea, again, to continue to meet one another and learn from each other a little bit. And one of the topics of discussion is that very item, public input. So I think Danielle and I had a little chat with Mark, and we felt it was important to revisit this. If you recall, at the March meeting, there was some discussion at the beginning of that meeting for why the item was removed as an agenda item and placed at the bottom with simply instructions to members of the public on how they can question Siak members and how we can address those questions. But I think it's important for us to discuss whether that's the method that we want to proceed with, and I think also I'd be able to identify what sorts of questions should be coming to the Siak members, what questions are maybe beyond that scope should be going to trustees or to schools directly, because we always do encourage parents to have that conversation with their teacher, with their principal, and then they can, through that relationship and partnership, those questions, if they need to be, they can be moved up up to the superintendent and the professional staff in special education. So I think it's good for us to revisit that and talk about the process that we would like to see in place, and how we can, field some of those questions, the processes for answering them as well. Okay.
Joanna, maybe I'll add. We moved it to an email because in my 4.5 years in this portfolio, we didn't have one question. come through that process. So we thought we need to have, we want to be more successful in getting questions as opposed to having this item that in essence we're asking members of the public to be here to ask. So that's why we moved it instead to an email, thinking that makes it more accessible to people and also gives us the opportunity to prepare an answer as opposed to sort of off the cuff at the time. So that's why it was changed, but that's why we're having this discussion now. So the intent is that we go ahead and, if you recall the last two meetings, we've asked you to go and introduce yourself to someone that you don't know. Take the opportunity to get to know someone again, so an opportunity for an introduction, but then to talk about these three questions. And then we're going to hear back from you and your teams to then hear what your input is, what your ideas about how do we address questions.
Mark or Joanna, can I ask you a question? With that, can you be clear on those, sort of outline those? Oh, the questions that are up there.
Yes.
Oh, never mind.
That's right. So what's the scope of the questions that can be addressed at Siak meetings from the public? How might these questions be solicited and fielded? And how will these questions be answered? So it's thinking about the process, who should be fielding those questions, and the process for answering and getting back to the person with the inquiry.
And if you're wondering about the word scope, I guess it's what's our thinking about what's the appropriate type of question to come here. So the most obvious inappropriate question would be a question about someone's child, right? Obviously that's not a Siak question. So, but then for clarity for parents, so what would be an appropriate question? How far removed should it be? How broad-based in terms of, is this a board program question, or what supports are available, or a board policy, that kind of thing. And therefore are those questions that should come here to Siak, or should they be coming to trustees, or should they be coming directly to staff? So that's the kind of discussion we were thinking about. What are the types of questions that we would want to come here to Siak? And then how do we get those questions from people, and how do we answer them? Make sense? So go say hi to someone that you don't know and go and chew on these. Way you go.
Could please come back. It looks like everybody had a really good discussion. And as we return back to our meeting, I just wanted to acknowledge, and my apologies, I got swept away and forgot to mention this, that our chair of the Special Education Advisory Committee, Danielle Adair, was not able to be here today, which is why I stepped in to fill in for her for tonight. Okay, so back to our summary of our discussion. If we could please go around the table and have somebody report back on where you've landed on the 3 questions that we were to consider. So maybe we'll start with Lucille and Christina, please.
We discussed all 3 of the questions, and the first question that we spoke about was the scope of the questions. And we felt that the scope should be broad, because both based on prior experience, I feel that it's hard for us to say what the scope should be, because we haven't had much experience in people asking questions. So I thought that it should be very broad, and then we could either funnel the information to the school board if we felt that that was appropriate, or funnel the information to parents about what is available to them through the organizations. That was the first one, yeah?
I just had a suggestion from Mark that we address the first question first and then come back to the second question, then the third. Okay, so moving on to, we've got Diane and Judy.
We agree the scope, we don't necessarily think the scope should be limited. We want to encourage parents to be coming to Siak and using us as a sounding board and a resource. That doesn't mean that we have to be the ones that answer the questions, but there should be a record in them encouraged to come to us and to the reps with their questions. And even if they aren't something that Siak can answer, they should be recorded and said, this has gone to here. Here's a record of who it's been to. This is a date that we're expecting an answer back, so that there's accountability. Because a lot of times I think sometimes the thought is sometimes the questions go into a big black hole and they don't necessarily get answered. And we should be trying to, I guess, scope, trying to encourage, I guess, the questions, but that's probably, I think, the second question. They've disappeared off there, so I'm not sure where that falls. Do you have anything?
Thank you. Moving on to James and Margot.
Okay, so James and I had a really interesting discussion. We felt that looking on, I guess, the conversation that you had at the last at the last committee meeting, you were talking a lot about the difference between advising and advocating, and that kind of played heavily into what we thought was important in the scope of the questions. So kind of where we landed was that we wanted to ensure that if people are coming to ask questions, that they're questions for the greater good of all students or a larger group of students versus a personal question concerning a specific either population or a specific student. So the idea that it's for the greater good of students across the school board as far as scope. Anything to...
All special education students.
No, I would say all students.
I think it should be.
So James feels specifically children with special educational needs, but I think also it should be looking at the greater good of all students too. Maybe with that in focus.
Okay. Thank you. Moving on to Deidre and Lisa. No, Deidre and Diane.
Thank you. We talked about the need for this to be a public forum where parents of special education learners can freely come here to express any concerns that they may have. We find that perhaps it's not as easy and available to them to get contacts for us as organizations, and maybe they need to come here, or they feel that this is a proper venue for them to come and speak about their concerns. So in terms of the scope, I think that it would be regarding any particular concern that they have about their child in the special education. And I mostly say special education because that is what we are here sitting together to discuss. So, yeah.
Thank you. And then Lisa, I believe you paired up with Tracy. Okay.
Hello, everyone. Coming to you from the back row. I just would like to say that I think we were in concurrence with what most people said. We talked a lot about the scope and just kind of what that balance was around the general, high-level kind of questions versus the real small detail, individual type questions. I think we thought it would be more appropriate for kind of those broader questions that apply to entire groups of students. That would be most appropriate. Yeah.
Okay. And finally, Lisa and Heather. Sorry, Allison and Heather.
Okay, well, we discussed about the fact, again, that it should be a higher level, so not specific questions about specific issues that a parent may have that would be better dealt with at the school level, but program focused, so dealing with topics that address a larger group of children. So looking at providing feedback on where programs are needed, where programs are working well or maybe not working as well as the board might hope, where further resources are needed to make the program as successful as it could be, that would provide us with ground level feedback of how programs are actually working, and that they could come through the organizations to Siak.
Thank you. Okay, and
Sorry, I just want to address the concern. I just want to make sure that we don't put out something that says to a parent they can't come to Siak with a question, even if it's about their child, because not every parent is going to know where they should go, that they should go to their school board, or they should go to their trustee, or so I understand that we don't want to be answering specific questions about a child at Siak, but I don't think we should be putting out any kind of documentation that would suggest that we aren't open to hearing about those, because this is the spot that parents might have as their only opportunity. And so maybe they get directed to a Siak rep who can then help them through the process. But I'm just really cautious as to not to say, okay, you can't bring a question here about a specific child or a specific issue.
thank you, Judy, for that clarification. That's certainly what I've heard when I've joined Deidre's and Diane's group as well. So maybe we'll start here again and revisit now question 2 and maybe 3 if it seems like that makes sense to go together. If you have something new to add or elaborate on.
Yeah, I mean, I think the comment that there's been no questions for the last 4 years is obviously telling us that we're doing something wrong. I mean, people are getting questions and their parents coming to organizations all the time with concerns about programs and resources. I feel, well, in our group, we discussed the fact that we obviously don't have the right forum to bring those questions, or that people don't know that what's available or how to do that, and somehow we need to improve the way that we communicate that there is a forum for them. Whether those will be answered, as mentioned, won't necessarily be answered by members of Siak, or won't necessarily even be discussed at Siak because it's not appropriate, but that they at least have a place to come to be directed to the right place to go.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to Deidre and Diane, and Sophia, welcome. If you want to consider those questions and have your input as well, then we'll come back to you too. Okay?
So we talked about how they might be solicited or fielded. Generally speaking, if people come to this public meeting, we feel that they should be able to have their chance. And if we ask the question, are there any questions from the public, and there's nobody here, well, then we just keep going, and it doesn't really hurt. But we also feel that there also could be the opportunity for them to email them in to Lorna as per stated here, so that they have both options, whether or not they want to come in here personally or they want to contact us via email and then be fielded that way.
Thank you. Lisa and Tracy.
Hello. So in addition to what was just said in terms of the flexibility and multiple ways for people to have their questions posed, we were thinking about the other end as well, and that is the answers that are going back. And we talked about appending the Q&As to the minutes and or creating frequently asked questions if we ever indeed get to that point, just so people don't have to go rooting for answers and that kind of intel can be broadly shared. Does that sound right there, partner? Oh, right. We talked about the information flow quite a bit too. So who they were going to come into, and then what the routing process would be and who would do that routing, you know. So if they came into Lorna, would the chair direct who answers, or who would do that piece? I think that was a question. Yes.
Okay, thank you. We'll move to James and Margot.
All right. Okay, so quickly, just to sort of recap on what everybody else said, particularly what Alison and Judy have brought up, I think it's really interesting, and I think it would be, I think, valuable to look at what might be stopping people from coming. So what Alison was saying is that if this is not seen as a venue where people feel welcome, what can we do to make people feel more welcome, to make them feel that they can come? Because although I think the idea of having the online questions is great because it does allow people equitable access, I don't think we should turn them away if they come. So if anybody comes to the Siak meeting, I think anyone who wants to speak should have an opportunity to speak and should feel welcome. Again, coming back to how we answer those questions, what James and I talked about is because each of us comes from a very different and diverse background. So we will all have different opinions on things. So, and we're not going to have the answers to all the questions. If we can answer the question at the time, we should do so. But if we can't, we think it should be on the agenda for the next meeting to ensure that that question is answered. I think that was it. That was it.
Okay, thank you. Judy and Diane.
Okay, you're going to wish I never came. So a few things. When there's going to be a discussion or a topic, because we were looking on the website and the agenda for this meeting is not up on the website. So first of all, public don't even know what we're going to be talking about. So sometimes we might not have the agenda ahead of time, but we might know what the main topics are going to be or a presentation. If that information can be put out so the parents can know ahead of time and maybe have a time frame, because sometimes these Siak meetings can drag on and have some quite boring sections in them for the public. And also the public questions tend to be at the end, and sometimes when meetings have dragged on, we don't get to that section. And so they might sit here for 3 or 4 hours and then not even get called upon. So maybe if there's a presentation which the public might be interested in, is that the public questions can come around that agenda item and they don't have to sit through everything else. And maybe having a letter go out to every child who's in spec ed to let them know about Siak and what we come up with as our way of soliciting questions. And another thing we talked about was email's okay, but again, email's so it's drawn out and there's not a discussion that can really happen well through email. So we were thinking that maybe we wanted to use social media and actually have scheduled chats or online where there's certain Siak members and trustees that will sit in a chat group, for lack of a better term, and parents can come and there's a 2-hour discussion that we can all, and at the end of that, you know, main questions or concerns can be summarized and presented to Siak and posted for the public. But again, a lot of it comes down to the communication and the flow, is that it's very hard for parents to get that information, and how do they find it? How do they get it? How do we communicate this out to everyone? And I think that's something that Siak has struggled with for years. And we need to start using some of the technology available to us out there, like even a Facebook group. Like I don't know if there's something against us having that, but you know, where people can chat. So it goes across all of the different groups, because I know there's certain ones out there for each of our specialties, but you know, something general.
Okay, thank you for that. And finally, Christina and Lucille.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I'm here. So we touched upon, most of what we wrote down has been touched upon. I loved hearing about the use of social media, because certainly parents do have questions and do want to give input, and it's a matter of us figuring out how we can solicit it. And there are Facebook groups probably for all of the groups represented here. And last month, there were a lot of questions that came through that group and were redirected to Lorna via email. So, yeah, if we can use social media, then that's a great way to solicit and be proactive, I guess, as reps, and let people know that we are here to represent them and have their questions asked and answered. And then just the flow of information of referring the public either to a relevant organization rep and having that rep respond to them, or if it's a board question, going in that direction, and then closing the loop by letting other committee members know, so that we can all be better informed and know how to better direct parents who are looking for resources.
Okay, thank you. So what I'm hearing from all of you, and I won't be able to do complete justice to it, but just at a high-level summary, what I'm hearing is that it's very important for all of you to make sure that all of the community members and parents and guardians have free access to be able to ask questions, especially questions that are pertinent to special education and the needs of their children and students. And I'm hearing that we do need to have a better process in place for, number one, informing our school communities about Siak and the different community associations, so that they're fully aware where they can go for support on the association end, and also who their liaison is at the board, which is Siak, to be able to ask and have questions answered. I've heard some suggestions around maybe a list of frequently asked questions, so that we can keep track of that, and so that all of the members are aware of what the questions are being asked and what the responses are. I like the idea of having, so it sounds like we might want to have this as its own agenda topic on the agenda, and leave the little blurb that we have at the bottom, the statement about you may contact. So that's always available. So anybody who goes to the website, looks at the agenda, has that available to them without access to any other information, but have it as a standalone item. And I really like Judy's suggestion around having a designated time frame. So I'm kind of seeing nods that might be a good thing. It would mean that the chair would simply have to work that into the list of, the items, maybe pause something, give the public the ability to ask questions, and then return to the agenda. So that's kind of a logistical piece that would have to be worked out, how that takes place. But I do appreciate that we can't have people sit and wait to ask a question if they're here for that. So that sounds like a very reasonable request. And I know certainly Deidre and Diane talked about sharing information with the parent and guardian community. And so perhaps every student upon JK-SK grade 1 registration or moving into the new school receives a pamphlet about Siak. Information on where they can find our information on the website, and contact info for all the associations. So if they have an association-specific question, they can go directly to that. So that's kind of what I've heard. There's lots more, and Lorna has taken the notes, and she'll be able to summarize that, and that'll appear in our next meeting minutes. I see a couple questions. Judy, James, then Christina.
Okay, I just wanted to ask about the social media. Did you mean like this is for
Judy?
Judy, yeah. Do you mean like a forum for?
Yeah, like there's different ways we can do it, right? One can be an open forum, like a Facebook group is always there, but you could have something where where you have if you have celebrities and stuff, right, where they have these chats. Say we're online for this amount of time, and these people, here's your group that you go to. I don't know what you officially call it. I'm not really, a social media guru, but you can have these chats. So maybe we schedule one a month, or one every couple months, and say okay, and there's going to be 2 or 3 people from Siak there, talking about it, and then it's more of an online, discussion instead of everyone having to group again, because we're such a broad, everyone doesn't have to come and drive anywhere. They can sit in the comfort of their home.
I just wanted to say I think that's an excellent idea, because a social media forum could set parameters, set the scope for for questions, so that the public, when they do tune in, they'll see what's an appropriate question and what's an inappropriate question. And so it could be a very powerful tool. And also looks like, that we can provide some answers.
Modern.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Judy?
With regards to communicating out to the parents, where you said, upon JK, SK, or changing schools, they get a pamphlet, I would actually suggest going a step further, where we send out letters for every student that has an IEP, saying, your IEP is coming up, do you want to do the blah, blah, blah. I don't think it's just IPRCs, I think it's IEPs. And can we not just send a letter included in every IEP letter that gets mailed out that says, here's Siak. This is what we do. This is a new update for the year. Once every September, we send that out. I think we send them to IEPs. It might just be IPRCs, but something like that.
Yeah, Margot?
Sorry, I just want to add to that, because there are still also so many non-identified. I would think it would be nice to send that letter out to the whole school, everybody, because IEP, although yes, you might have an IEP, there are many kids that don't, and it is those parents that would be struggling to know what to do. So I think that might be a nice part of their welcome package, as you're saying, is that every child gets, and I think they maybe don't, but I think they do get something on, because I know they get I know there's stuff with your stuff in it.
I'm talking about people that are already in the system, though, they don't get a welcome package, right? Kids already in the system don't get that welcome package. So I'm just trying to make sure that we're not just concentrating on new kids.
So
actually kids in the system.
A welcome back package.
Okay, Christina, you had a question?
No, I think they captured it. I too think that we need to not limit it to JK and grade 1. A lot of kids are identified much, much later than that. And parents always need more support and more answers. So a welcome or welcome back, or here's your big pile of paperwork at the beginning of the year, or maybe a little later than that so it doesn't get lost in all that paperwork. But certainly every student, every family would benefit from this information.
Right. So I agree with that. I think we need to send it to all the families and have a time in mind that makes sense, so that they have access to it and see that. And just something occurred to me around maybe even for the school websites, increasingly you're getting more standardized. They all look kind of the same. To have that as its own, what do you call it, button, so that parents can click and you know, even if they remotely think, oh, I think I want to look into that. And yeah. Sophia.
Just wondering, it's somewhat related, but the special edition newsletter that comes out, I've always found that I'm not sure who publishes that, because it's hit and miss. I get it sometimes, I don't get it sometimes, but the few times I do get it, it's fabulous. And I always wonder, like, are other families receiving this? How, like, who goes on the list? I've had it a couple times. I'm like, wow, this is great, and then I never got it again. So what's the story?
So that's a Student Services Department newsletter. It's not. It's the audience is intended for staff, so it's not written for a parent audience. We share it with Siak as a courtesy, but it's not. If we were going to do a parent newsletter, it would look different, right? So it's meant as a sort of inter-department newsletter.
Yeah, I always find it really helpful because it tells you what sort of PD is happening for the staff and the EAs. But is that sort of a monthly thing, or is that, how often does that?
We don't have it set per month. We try to, but it depends on what's going on. And
because I haven't received it in a long, like, has there been one this year?
yeah, we've shared them out.
Did you?
Yeah, other people have seen them. Yeah,
Okay.
it has gone out.
Okay. Because I didn't get a copy. Maybe I'll talk to Lorna later to get my emails. But I thought that was fabulous. So I don't know, like, something like that to involve parents, because I agree. I think, sorry, I walked in a little bit later, but for sure there's so much ambiguity around Siak. What is Siak? What's the purpose? How do we get involved? What does it do for me? I think there's very little education for families in the system about what really is the purpose. And that's sort of, you know, our job sitting here every month would be way more effective, I think, if families fully understood how it all works.
Okay, well, thank you. Oh, Diane?
Just one final comment. When we were talking about potential online forums, maybe if we are making it a discussion item, or last time it took up a fair chunk of time about autism, and if we were able to say in the agenda on such and such a day, we're having this forum or this discussion, because we can only, you know, have a limited amount of time around this topic in person, but now we're going to have this online forum discussion where we can, you know, answer questions and get into more detail. I think if we tied the two in to let people know that that's happening, or after a presentation, there's going to be a forum or a discussion on that topic, that might draw some of the interest, or, you know, focus people into joining in.
Well, thank you, everybody. This has been a really rich discussion, and I think we've got a lot of really great takeaways for how to facilitate communications with our parents and guardians. It sounds like this will be an agenda item for a future agenda for us to continue to build and solidify a process. So I'll leave that with Mark. And now, being conscious of the time, we're going to move on. So next up is we're looking at the dates for upcoming meetings. We meet the first Tuesday of the month, and there is a suggestion about holding a second meeting in May, which would be May 21st, not 17th as stated on the agenda, but 21st. That was an error. So
So if you recall, last meeting we had initially had 2 meetings scheduled for April. But we said with the delay in the budget coming from the province that we would look at two meetings in May. So now this is that third Tuesday in May.
okay. So I guess we want a show of hands for approval of that and consent on proceed with an additional meeting in May. If I could get a show of hands. Anybody opposed? Okay, and obviously you have an alternate, so if you can't make the meeting, then you can check in with your alternate, and hopefully everybody will be represented. Good.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, okay. So moving on to our special presentations, and just before we proceed, Mark will update us.
Yeah, so if you recall, our Code of Conduct consultation we had on the agenda last time and ended up delaying. Unfortunately, it's delayed again, and that's because this is sort of a regular process that goes on for school boards. They have to revise their Code of Conduct and do a consultation with a variety of groups, one of which is Siak. The province has added some parameters to this. The current government has added some parameters. You know that some code changes have come, one of which is the cell phone ban that was recently announced by the province. So this is delayed again because our staff that are doing this have had to go and do some revising, and so they're going to get back to us when they're ready to do that. So it's going to come to us eventually. It's just delayed again, unfortunately.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. Moving on, we have with us Michelle Bates, who is our Htsb mental health lead. And Michelle will present to us about the mental health strategy. I had the pleasure of sitting as a trustee representative on the mental health committee for a couple of years, and I'm certainly very fond of Michelle and the work that her team is doing, and I'm looking forward for us to learn more. Welcome, Michelle.
Sorry, Michelle, you're going to have to sit and use the mic. I know. Sorry to cramp your style, but because it's live streamed and video voice recorded, we got to use the mics. Yeah.
Well, you will see me having to sit on my hands because I am expressive with my hands. So, and the fact that I can't move away around is also going to be a challenge, but I'm up for it. So nice to see all of you. I recognize some familiar faces, which is lovely, and also the opportunity to see some new faces. So thank you for that. So I've got a little bit of a presentation prepared, and with an opportunity for questions about the material that I'm bringing forward, but then also an opportunity for us to move to the back tables. I understand that's a process that as a group you use, and it gives you an opportunity to work on some prepared questions. So with that having been said, we'll just dive in if that's okay. So just as we begin, I invite you to be thinking about what is it that you know and what is it that you would like to know about student mental health and well-being and HDSB. So this is just a self-reflection, just an opportunity. Sometimes in class we call it a minds-on activity. So what am I bringing to this subject matter? Where is my learning at with this particular topic? And so these are three things that we've come prepared to talk about this evening with you. So what is the provincial context, which is very important because it links and drives our work. What's happening here in our board, and in particular, you'll see our board's mental health and well-being strategy and our yearly action plan for this year. And then also specifically, we're wanting your feedback and input on those two documents. So provincially, just curious, how many of you have heard of School Mental Health Assist? Anyone? So we've got a couple of hands. Okay. So this is a provincial organization that drives a lot of the work around school mental health. With the new government, they've been renamed. So they're now School Mental Health Ontario. So if you hear that name, it's the previous School Mental Health Assist organization. So as I mentioned, they set directions provincially, they provide resources to board, and they also have a strong emphasis on implementation and support and coaching. So Mark and I have a provincial coach. We were on the line with her just last week, and she helps us with action items that we have in our plan and how we can be bringing them to life here in our board. So school mental health has these priorities. These are the new priorities under the new government that were released in February. So the focus areas are schools and classrooms, new mental health workers in high schools, which is exceptional program other funding. So you may have heard of some of that work, and I'm certainly happy to answer questions about that. Another area of focus is suicide prevention, and then also progress and impact monitoring. So what this is relating to is both the work of the mental health workers in high schools, but it's also about what is each board's action plan and what progress are they making with that particular action plan. So this slide, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, one of the goals of our multi-year plan, and this is just to indicate that our work is very much aligned with the BIPSA and the multi-year plan. And so in this particular slide, what we're looking at is increasing students' sense of belonging and personal sense of well-being, both of which we know are central to a student's sense of personal well-being and mental health. We used this slide in a recent Family of Schools meeting, and I thought it might be useful for you as a Siak committee to see all of the key features of this work that we've been doing. And so you'll see as far back as 3 years ago, April 2016, the initiative of unpacking the backpack, which was really a pedagogical approach to understanding what do students bring with them when they come to daily school attendance. So they might bring worries, they might bring hunger, they might bring fears about fitting in at school, they might, be concerned about their achievement and all those kinds of things. And that was really quite foundational work in our board to help us understand that our learner is beyond academics. Academics is crucial, but there are many factors that influence what is happening for the child. And in fact, when you're out in our schools, you'll often hear our staff say, let's unpack that student's backpack. Let's understand them as a learner at a very deep and comprehensive level. And then you'll see these other initiatives that have happened throughout the years. And then finally, of course, in February or March, I guess it was just a few weeks ago, we did a Family of Schools, and the focus was on every school's SIPSA well-being goal. And so we had an opportunity for schools to dig deeply into what that goal is and what the resources are available to them. So then what's happening here at our board? So I've got a handout. So on this particular slide deck, you'll see these are hot links, but we have brought along a paper copy of our strategy and a paper copy of our action plan. So perhaps at this time I'll hand that out, if that's okay. So I can see in the handout that we don't have the strategy, the overall strategy, unless it's on one of the back pages, but I don't think so. So maybe in a moment I'll pull that up. I think, Summer, because this is on your account. I would. Maybe I'll do that when we're at the tables. So we'll just continue on. So the other piece, just to share very briefly in terms of my role as a mental health lead, each board has a designated mental health lead. And our primary work is to help develop the mental health and well-being strategy and to help develop the yearly action plan items. In our board, we do that with the input of a steering and advisory committee, of which Joanna was representative on for a few years, and now Kelly Amos is the trustee rep on that committee. But we've got students, we've got parents, we've got principals, vice principals, consultants. So we've got a broad stakeholder representation at that committee level, and you'll see their work in the development of the yearly action plan. And so my work is in working with that committee to develop that plan, and then also to be the navigator and the stick handler, and to ensure that that work is coming to fruition and being seen. Also part of the portfolio is our partnerships with our community agencies and looking at requests to partner. So that's the bulk of the work as a mental health lead. So,
sorry, Michelle, if you want, if there's a doc that wasn't printed and you want to click on one of those links and put it up, you can.
I will. It's currently under Summer's account, so I'm going to have to switch accounts. So my thought was I would put that up while we're doing the discussion, if that's okay. But I think on the document you do have for the yearly action plan, you'll see the strategy in the numbers. So it just presents itself as a different document, but you'll see those. So number 1, number 2, those are our strategy items. So I appreciate that. That's probably a very quick run through for you. So I'm very happy to hear what your questions are.
Okay. Any questions for Michelle? I've got Diane.
Hi, thank you. I'm just wondering, you mentioned about the new mental health workers in high school. So how will that change the ratio? Is that a new set of hires? Because I know sometimes the social workers are dealing with 5 schools. So how will that change that ratio maybe?
So the mental health workers in high schools, each board got a proportional allotment. Our board allotment was 3.8. So how we chose to implement that was 3 social workers and a psychologist. So the 3 social workers, there's 1 assigned to each of our geographical areas. So we have support and representation of this service throughout our board. Their focus is twofold at the present time. So one is to provide group work, which is the direct service to students. So they are available to partner with the school-based social worker in that high school, with a community agency that has an approved partnership for group work, or to partner with a school staff member to provide group work. And so the intentionality behind that was to ensure that we're getting that service directly to students, to provide a new service. And so we're beginning to see that work is happening. In the second focus of the mental health workers in high schools is to help build capacity amongst educators. And our first emphasis has been with guidance and student success teachers. So we've provided 3 learning sessions in response to their identified learning needs around student mental health and well-being. More is forthcoming. More work is being added, more direction and demands from the government. But we're a small but mighty group up to the task of doing this. So to your question, your specific question about the ratios, I guess we could do the math and look at the ratios. I think what's important is when we look at our data collection to look at the number of kids who have been serviced with a new type of service.
Any other questions for a presenter? No. Okay. Teacher?
Hi there. I'm just wondering, just reading through, because really based on what we've received here, I'm just trying to go through to figure out what I could ask. I guess of interest is just the anxiety groups that are being piloted in the elementary schools. Could you tell us a little bit more about what's happening there?
Sure, very happy to tell you about group work that in particular is focused on helping students with worries or with anxious feelings. So one of our emphasis is looking at evidence-based and evidence-informed interventions, ideally ones that are delivered in the classrooms, so we don't have to necessarily be doing pull-out groups, and ones that are being delivered by our teachers. So we have a number of those initiatives happening. I think your question, though, is related to what we refer to as a tier 2 or a targeted group. So what we did was we took a survey of student needs. We listened to our staff saying, here's the kids that are coming forward with requests for social emotional support. Here's the services we're currently provided, and we recognized we had a gap. So our CYCs, a group of CYCs came together and developed an evidence-informed group intervention. They're piloting that, and our research department is helping us with the evaluation. So depending on the outcome of the evaluation, with favorable results, we would look to scale that up and make that group work available to all of our CYCs, who, of course, are supporting our elementary schools.
Do we have any other questions to help us further understand the mental health strategy? Okay.
Hi. Just wondering about, you're saying with students come forward looking for assistance, is there anything in play currently for teachers that have noticed differences within the classroom, or again, maybe parents that feel that their children need a little bit more support and they don't know where to go or how to implement that at home or within the school as a relationship?
So the technical term we use for what you've just described is pathway to care. So how is it that someone recognizes a concern? And then once they know or recognize a concern, do they know whom they can approach to ask for help? So some of our students are very good about saying, I have this concern, can you help me with this? A lot of our teachers are very excellent at, because they work with students every day and they know norms and they know when something's not quite right for that individual student. So lots of our teachers recognize that and then go to their school team. And then if that concern is persisting, they then go to school resource team. It's at school resource team that parents are invited, because their child is, there's going to be a discussion or a problem-solving pathway discussion that goes on. So we think that there are these three different kind of pathways or three different stakeholders. Certainly our current government is very interested in having us articulate these pathways much better. There's expectations that our staff understand these pathways much more clearly, that they know the signs and symptoms. This was part of the work that our mental health workers in high schools did with guidance and student success, helping them to understand when students are in need and how to respond to them at a tier 1 or beginning tier 2 level. So we're doing work in this area. Our board has done work in this area for quite a number of years. We're not there yet, but continue to see that as important work to do. Thanks.
All right, Diane, please.
Sorry, I'm trying to read through this quickly as well. I noticed that there's CBT and DBT groups are offered in high schools. Are there also plans for that, or are they already existing in the elementary schools?
So to your colleague's question about the anxiety groups, that's based on CBT, so cognitive behavioral therapy. So that is happening at the elementary level. There are also a number of curricular programs that we support, things like Kids Have Stress Too, Mind Up curriculum, Second Step, Kelso's Choice. Those are all CBT informed or CBT based programs. And the reason is because it's known to be an efficacious approach. So it is the approach of preference for anxiety and depression for sure. So at the elementary level, these CBT groups are happening, these CBT informed curricula are happening. In terms of DBT, at the present time, it is happening in high schools with this partnership with our mental health workers and the school-based social workers.
Sorry, Michelle, so people don't know what DBT means.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So DBT is a clinical approach. It refers to dialectical behavioral therapy. Again, a very evidence-informed approach with a particular goal and a particular population in mind. So it is happening at high school. Some of our social workers are delivering DBT mini groups in our behavior resource classes, because we know that those students sometimes are challenged with emotional regulation, which is what the DBT approach in particular seems to help with a lot.
Okay, I see questions from Allison and Heather.
Just a quick question. Are these programs being offered at Georgetown High School?
Are you asking about the mental health workers in high schools? The plan is that every high school will be offering a group. Our challenge currently is that we have a social work vacancy at Georgetown. So we're working to fill that vacancy, and when it's filled, we'll be offering that group.
Allison, please.
Yeah, so I just to summarize sort of at a high level, the overall strategy is that to have mental health workers in all the high schools, and then at the elementary schools, how do you see the overall, who's going to be delivering overall programming related to the myriad of mental health issues that we might see on a day-to-day basis in the long term? Who would that be delivered by?
What I'd like to do is move to a slide that shows the triangle of tiered interventions, and my hope is in doing that, as I speak to it, I can map on the services that you're inquiring about. So if I may, I'd like to begin first with the triangle. So some of you or all of you might be familiar with Education for All. So the notion of tiered interventions. So there are things we do that are good for all students at Tier 1. They're called universal strategies. Then there are things we offer for some students in a Tier 2 approach. And then there are Tier 3, more limited, but certainly for students who are requiring that. So in School Mental Health Assist, School Mental Health Ontario's work, they took that tiered approach and applied it to mental health and well-being. So you can see at Tier 1, there's no mental health problem, there's only occasional upset, and the strategies we're employing are good for all students. So examples would be safe and caring classrooms, positive student-teacher relationships, equity and inclusive, and so on and so forth. We know that all of these relate to and build student mental health and well-being. And so at a Tier 1, most of those things are happening through the support of teachers. Sometimes in our elementary schools, so your inquiry was around elementary. So at elementary schools, our child and youth counselors are available to provide Tier 1 supports. So a common approach that you might hear about are community circles, team building, restorative practices, zones of regulation. So these would all be examples of Tier 1. So all the students in the classroom are learning about this. It's taught in conjunction with the classroom teacher. Everyone in the class is getting that. When we look at Tier 2, this is often when we think about it might be in specialized classes or it might be in what we refer to as a pull-out. So how do we help some of our students? And in terms of at the high school level, the government's direction around the mental health workers in high schools, and I want to say this, I can appreciate that this can be confusing because when I'm talking about the mental health workers in high schools, they are social workers. They are our permanent staff who have stepped into these roles and we've backfilled them. So I don't want to suggest that prior to the mental health workers in high schools that our board wasn't providing mental health support. Our board has a long and rich history of providing professional support staff to support student mental health and well-being. I think it's helpful to think about the mental health workers in high schools as an enhancement to that. So in the way we've chosen to roll this out as a board, we've brought this mental health worker in high school enhancement to all of our high schools. We didn't want to be offering it in just some of our high schools. We wanted that resource and support available to all of our schools. The restrictions around the government funding for the mental health workers in high schools is that it must be in high schools. So this work that resource cannot flow down into the elementary school.
Go ahead, Jonathan.
So are we effectively saying that for the students who ultimately will end up in Tier 3 in high schools needing the support at the lower stages when they probably start with their journey with mental health, the funding is not necessarily there to provide that more intensive support that they might need? So Obviously, group sessions are great, but we'll be still relying on parents to take children to psychologists and external supports with the way that the funding is right now.
So as a board at both elementary and secondary levels, we do provide professional support services to students across the tiers. What this extra funding has done is allow us to focus some additional resources and work at Tier 2. That's been the preference and the direction of the government. The thinking being that ideally with service directed at that level, we will have fewer students going into a Tier 3 situation, and those that we're able to recognize them at a much earlier level, and we're able to transition them to care. The model of thinking is that as a board, and this is a provincial direction, that our sweet spot, so where we should be directing our resources, is at Tier 1 and 2, and a little bit in Tier 3. Where we look to our community for these intensive services is Tier 3. And so this is where we really work hard to have these established partnerships and pathways to care. I would be remiss, though, to say that we are very aware of the statistics, which says that only 20% of our students who need professional mental health services in the community actually get them. So we know this is why boards of education provide a large amount of mental health services because families and children can't get to those resources for a myriad of reasons, and we're able to effectively provide those services here in the school.
Okay, so we will now move into our group discussion. I know our mental health lead is looking forward to input into the strategy. So we'll move to the back of the room and have a discussion right now. Thank you.
So there's 3 questions you're going to see on the tables at the back, and if we can just pull that slide up. Summer, can we go back to this? Oh, sorry, back to the slideshow and put the questions up. There we go. So if we hit present again so we can see those full screen, thanks. So the questions aren't necessarily meant to be answered in order. They're all 3 are there, and so we're going to break into 3 groups. So basically just divide yourselves up equally across the 3 tables at the back. We have chart paper on there and markers. For those of you new to Siak, this is a process we've done before. The intent being that everyone has a chance to have some voice in a more interactive setting at the table groups. So Michelle's got some great questions here for us. And if we're going back a couple meetings to our discussions about Siak being an advisory committee, right? This is you giving the board and staff advice around our mental health strategy. So we want to hear your input. So as we divide up, so we're timing wise, we're a little bit over time, right? With some of our other items. So we're going to do about 5 minutes per table. And so we'll dig into it right away, get into those questions, and then we'll let you know when we're going to rotate on and move on. So you get a chance to go to all 3 tables over the next 15 minutes. Okay, away we go. So if I can thank Michelle before she goes. Michelle has been our mental health lead for, is this year 2? Yeah, her second year now, and has been a manager in our board for a number of years. But we really appreciate her leadership with this work in our system. We all recognize very important work for all of our students. Top of mind, more so I think in our society. There's more and more awareness and willingness to talk about mental health and the needs of everyone, including our students. So we just know this is such important work, and we appreciate your leadership, Michelle. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, so Michelle's going to take the charts away. And one of the things I know we've talked about is the value of feedback to us as staff, but then the response that you would appreciate in terms of knowing how have we acted upon that feedback, that input from you. So Michelle's going to take those away. Some of the questions we have answers for right away. So I think what Michelle and I were talking about is she'll kind of run through those, the input you've given, and frame responses around them. Some of them are, thanks, we are doing that work right now. Some of it is, yes, we need to dig into that further. Some of that's a new idea that we haven't considered, and we will, those kinds of things. So she will work through those and develop responses for us, and we'll bring those back to you. So hopefully we'll see if it's by next. Some of those are things that are an easy response. Some of them take some time. So we may be able to bring back some responses right away next month. Others will take more time because of the complexity of implementation. Okay? Thanks.
Okay. Sorry. Is there any way to get a copy of the presentation?
Yes, we can send you. We can turn it into a PDF. Yeah, we'll do that.
In the future, can we request all presenters bring copies of their presentations before they present? I don't know about everyone else, but sometimes it's easier to take notes and read it.
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay, great. Moving on. We've got a period of discussion. Siak, questions, discussion? Yes? So, should go around the table.
Let's just open for questions.
All right, so we're open for questions from all of you. All right, Deidre.
So I'm just going to bring up something that we discussed, Mark, back in February before my first meeting regarding the process of identification and information sessions for families of identified gifted children. What's happened this year is, as of December, a memo went out which expressed to the CERTs at the time that the process was changing, in which the parents are now being required to sign or commit to a referral to the self-contained program before they're allowed or invited to attend the information session at these individual schools. Our association has been in touch with several families who are confused about, first of all, why this change has taken place, and why or what it means that for them having to sign this referral to the self-contained program prior to getting the information. A lot of times when the identification comes across the table, parents and families of these gifted learners are not aware of what even being gifted means. And having the opportunity to go to these information sessions, provide them with more details about their child, about the very best environments for them, whether in the self-contained program or in the homeschool classroom. And we feel that it's detrimental to our families that this has changed now, because our families are not getting the information we feel that they should have going forward to make this decision for their learner. We have some information sessions coming up as soon as the 18th of April, 17th of April actually is the first one. And what we're asking is that all of the families of children who have been identified have the opportunity to attend these information sessions. and receive the information, be able to communicate with the teachers and witness the program so that they can make the very best decision for their child. I know that it's been expressed to us that perhaps they were making the decision to go to these self-contained programs on the basis of a newer school or a program that they felt had more bells and whistles, which we don't feel is fair. We think that our caregiver families are able to make the very best decision for their child, not based solely on what they see at these schools, but by talking to the teachers and becoming aware of what it really means to be amongst their peer group in the learning environment. And I guess we'd like to know what the numbers are this year for identified students and also those that have been invited to these information session. And we'd also like to request that all of our learners that have been identified receive an invitation to experience these information sessions and have the opportunity to be informed in what's available for them for their student.
Thanks for sharing your concerns, Deirdre. I know that we've been engaged in some dialogue back and forth via email about this. And so certainly our intent was not to create any confusion in terms of understanding that with parents. The opportunities are no different than they've been in the past in terms of the dialogue that occurs between parents and staff around the understanding the needs of each child and discussing what options are there. The opportunity to attend, to consider a homeschool resource support placement as well as a self-contained placement. Those have not changed either. What's different is the order. And so where in the past families would have gone from a knowing that their child has reached the criteria for an identification and gone directly to a gifted site visit and then come back to SRT for discussion, that's where the order has been changed. So where first you'd have that discussion at SRT about the needs of the child and where an ideal placement might be, whether it's homeschool or a self-contained, and then to go for a visit. And the reason why we made that change was so that the conversation was about the needs of the student first and not about this program or that. It was about what are the dialogue about the needs of that student. And when I shared that change, I think 2 meetings ago here, I shared that process, that change also makes the process the same as all the other exceptionalities. So we certainly are, once again, our intent is not to restrict the amount of information that parents have, the opportunity to learn about the options, not the intent at all. The intent is simply to have the dialogue at the school be about the needs of that child and then consider from that needs discussion what options should be considered. So the opportunity, if a family says we'd still, even though the discussion has been and recommendation has been to continue in their homeschool in a regular class, for the family to say, we'd still like to learn more about that self-contained setting, absolutely, and we've shared with schools to say, make sure parents still have that as an option, is to attend that self-contained setting. So if there's been confusion around that, we've sent messaging to clarify that with schools, that there should be no different in terms of options. It's just the order of events. That's the only thing that's changed this year. So,
so I'd just like to ask a comment about that situation in that, so the child goes to the SRT meeting, or we have the meeting, the parent has the meeting with the child and the team, But you're...
The student doesn't typically attend.
Okay, all right. So it's the parents and the team.
Yeah.
But in any discussion, it does need to involve the child. From a family perspective, which is the right placement for the child. And so the child at some point needs to see the school. Coming from a family like that, I feel that it's better to allow them to see what the choices are than to just say, as a parent, I'm going to make this decision for you and sign you up. And I just don't...
The open house events for families considering the gifted self-contained, they occur during the school day and students attend those. The school resource team meeting that I think you're referring, I'm not sure if you're blaring the two. That is just the school and the staff and the parent. But the open house opportunities,
but to get a visit to the school for the child, you have to have signed them up. I mean, for my child to go and try the school and see if this is somewhere he would feel comfortable and able to succeed, I have to have signed him up already. I have to have gone through the whole process when he might decide it's not for me, in which case we've got to go back and do the whole process all over again. It just seems, I just question, wouldn't it be more efficient to allow the child to see the placement, bearing in mind that these are gifted children who tend to be very strong-willed in their opinions, and then make a decision, an informed decision.
But they do attend the open house, the children. So,
but is it not the understanding that they have to have the referral first? So a lot of the experience involves sitting with their CERT and hearing about the identification and then talking about placement, whether or not it's the homeschool or these self-contained programs. And it's great to sit at the homeschool and have the CERT and the school suggest what they feel is best, but the caregivers are not invited to the information session unless they decided that they want a referral through to the self-contained program. So you're saying, sure, we'll give you more information, but sign your child up. You can take it back, but sign your child up now. Why aren't all these identified children just given the opportunity with their families to find out more about the program prior to making the decision to attend there?
So the reason we don't do that is what starts with the belief, the hope, the intention that we want to meet the needs of all students in a regular class in their home school. That's our first best choice placement for any student. Ideally, no student should have to leave their home school or a regular class for support. And the vast majority of our students do in fact stay in their regular class and get their support there. That's what we want to see happen. So we want that to be the first consideration for any support for a student. If that's not working, that's when we consider other placements. So that's why, with that philosophy in mind, I guess I would ask the question: why do we need to have students attending and families going to visit, whether it be gifted or LD or life skills, if the child is doing well in their home school? Our intent is not to say, why don't you consider that other placement if we can serve them well in their home school?
Where we understand that that's kind of the directive, that you want to keep them in their home school, but what's best for the child should be an option, not necessarily, we want to try you here first, and if you're not socializing well, you have no peer group, you're not being challenged because it's busy in the classroom, or really a lot of different behavioral options that could come up throughout the years as the learner grows. Why are they not given the opportunity to learn, ask questions, witness the program, and know what's available to them and their child before they make the decision on whether or not they should stay in the classroom or be a part of the self-contained classroom? It's more than just being challenged academically. They're inspired by peers. They find like-mindedness. We're sitting here today talking about a mental health strategy, and I'll tell you that gifted learners are highly sensitive. They have a very strong sense of being alone, that they're not understood, and that these classrooms provide more than just, maybe a different way of learning. It's about being amongst peers. And prior to attending these schools and these information sessions, we don't believe that parents have enough information at the homeschool level to make the best choice for their learner. We think that they should be informed about what's available for their child and make those decisions together as a family.
I understand your perspective. So I can ask staff to share that invitation more broadly, but it is not our intention to say as many students as possible, regardless of whether your needs are being met in the regular class, should go to a self-contained setting. That is not the message that we want to send, because we want to serve as many students as possible in their home school. We believe that that's what's best for kids, is to stay with their peers in their neighborhoods, where their friends are in their home school. And if they're thriving there, we don't want to discourage that. The intention of a self-contained setting, the ministry is very clear about this, is an opportunity for students for whom we're not serving well in that regular setting. So once again, we want parents to be well informed, but we don't want to send the message, you should go there. We want them to make good decisions based on having all the information, but not get the message, oh, I better go. We want to, that's why we've said the conversation at the school resource team meeting should be, how's your child doing? Are they thriving in that regular class setting? Are they being challenged? Do they have friends? All those things. And if that's the case, they shouldn't be going to that other placement. Once again, that applies to all exceptionalities. It's not just a gifted discussion. So we will, I can go back. We've already done some messaging again, as you've seen in your emails, but we can go back and ensure that families are not given the impression that they can't go. If they want to go, they're welcome to.
I think the concern is that they feel they need to commit to the program without having the information. And so maybe some are committing prior to having all the information and it's not best for their learner, or vice versa, they won't commit and then they're not receiving the information on and getting the details on whether or not it should be for their learner. Just because of the way the process has changed. And it worked well previously for years. And we're not sure why all of a sudden the change has been implemented. We understand that there was a third-party study done and that we're trying to make everything cohesive and the process is being the same. But again, I think we want to make sure that all exceptional children and their families understand what's available for them and that they can make decisions with their teachers and their CERT teams as to where their learners should be going. That's all we're asking.
Okay, Christine.
I was wondering about the data collection, so I'm glad you mentioned the third-party study. Is that something that could be made available? Because I'm curious to know how long the study was done for and what the data showed in terms of whatever exceptionality it is, how children do in the self-contained classroom versus in their home schools. I think that'd be interesting to look at if it could be shared.
For sure. We're in the third phase of the review, but we have the reports from the first two phases. We can certainly share those.
Sorry, just a question, a follow-up from last meeting since I'm new. I know, Diane, you mentioned around the special education plan that there was a minority report submitted from your association regarding it. So I'm just wondering, what's the process when somebody does submit a minority report? What happens to those concerns? I know it was around some of the need for early intervention identification of students with learning disabilities before grade 3 and 4, and even some of the specifics and special education placements. So when a minority report is put forth, how is that weighted in consideration, and when do we hear anything back about that?
So a minority report around let me step back. So the special education plan, came here in draft as the first step in the approval process, and then comes back here for more input and more tuning as things move along through the budget process. So that will occur, and then finally goes for approval in June along with the budget. So a group such as LDH that may choose to submit a minority report does that based on the final version of the plan that gets approved. Because along the way, the plan could change, and therefore the concerns that an association has may be addressed, right? So the minority report is based on that final version of the plan that's approved. A minority report is then submitted to the board, actually is addressed to the chair of the board. The chair writes a response to that in response to those concerns or issues that were raised. And in the appendices of the plan, there's a number of those, the minority report letter and the chair's response get included, so they're part of the plan.
All right, so we'll move on to agenda item 5.0, communications to Siak. Superintendent Zonneveld, Mark, has provided us with a detailed report, and I'll just let him speak briefly to a couple of key items.
Sorry, so I'm very conscious of our time because we've had some longer items tonight. And so I think I've given you 5 items. I'm just going to talk to 2 of them. One is a new program that we're beginning this for September called the Kindergarten Expressive Language and Literacy Program, Kelp. So you can see that there. I'm not going to go, I've given you a fair bit of detail there in my report. You can see that the focus is the program's there for students in their second year of kindergarten. We no longer call kindergarten JK and SK, but it's in their second year of kindergarten. And with that real focus on expressive language and literacy. So you can see the areas of focus there, the design of the program around the 2 groups will have the opportunity each term with I think we're going to be doing like a Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Thursday design. And the intent of that is that the students still remain connected back with their kindergarten program. So portion of their week is in their regular class, portion of their week is in this program. And that's for 1 semester, so for the first 5 months, and then we bring on 2 more groups in the second part of the year. And you can see the criteria there in terms of the needs of the students in the various areas. So that's a program that we're excited to start for September. So that referrals are occurring now because students need to be assessed by speech language pathologists to see if their needs are appropriate for the program. Parents are aware that occurs, and then an ongoing intake process happens based on the assessment by the speech language pathologist. So that's my first item, and we have a question. Sophia?
Just a quick one, because when I share this with our families, can parents express an interest in the program, or who refers them? The kindergarten teacher?
So the kindergarten, if you look at our problem-solving pathway, it's always a partnership with home and school. So I would hope that kindergarten teachers have already been in conversations with families about what the needs are of their students, and that this has been a discussion about what are those needs. And so now the CERT is coming to the parent and saying, look at this great opportunity, about the needs that we've been talking about already. Can you, I'd like to refer your child for a speech language assessment. So in some cases it might not be, especially if the student's newer into the school, during the school year. But I would hope in most cases they've already been talking about these needs, because children entering into this program, if you can see through the criteria there's some pretty complex needs that are there. So that so it wouldn't be I guess what I'm saying, it wouldn't be a surprise for the family that they're just hearing about this for the first time. And so here's this opportunity. So the referral would come from the CERT. If a parent, is aware of this and says, "Oh, might my child be appropriate?" For sure, they can have that discussion with the teacher. Yeah, we're moving pretty quickly on this because this has come along, quickly, but for sure. Yeah.
Good.
Actually, not necessarily a question. I want to say thank you. Thank you, thank you. LDA Halton has been preaching about phonological awareness deficit for many, many, many years, and the fact that it can be picked up in kindergarten, and we don't have to wait till grade 3, grade 4. So I was absolutely elated. I was just thrilled when I read that this morning or yesterday, and we'd like to applaud the staff for seeing the recognition.
Okay. Any other questions to Mark?
I'll go on to my other item quickly. So I'm just going to skip down to number 4 and highlighting some changes that have happened, or the province has told us are going to happen with the provincial budget. I say that because we know there's been some changes and then some not changes, and so we'll see. But to say that the memo that we got from the ministry, I believe March the 15th, don't quote me, but I think that's the date of the memo, and what got a lot of attention in the press was the change from a funded ratio of 22-1 in high school to 28. So that's where there's been a lot of public attention, which I appreciate. But I've included for you 2 paragraphs from the board agenda package tomorrow night that talks about, it's a much more lengthy board report on the preparation for the budget process that's going on. But I've highlighted 2 paragraphs for you that are specific about changes in other grants that really haven't got a lot of press or highlight in those changes, right, in terms of the media, et cetera. So if you go down to the middle of that first paragraph, a sentence starts saying, there are also a number of other allocations being eliminated, including, and there's the cost for the base amount, non-education workers, human resource transitions, and the local priorities. So these are all grants that, for an understanding of what's going on here, excuse me, our Superintendent of Business, Roxana Nagoy, we've got her scheduled to come at our next meeting at the beginning of May. I think I mentioned that to you before. So she can explain these in more detail. But what I want to highlight then is going down to the next paragraph, bottom of there, where it talks about an $18.7 million, this is what we anticipate, reduction for our board in funding. About $8 million of that is the difference in funding that will come because of the change in the 22-1 to the 28-1, right? That's about $8 million. The remaining 10.7 million are the other grants. So that 10.7 million is a significant amount of money. And you know that most of our school board budget is either positions or facilities, utilities, etc., right? Some money on materials, etc., but the vast majority of our costs is staffing and our facility costs. So that additional 10 million will have an impact on us for sure. So that's what Roxana is going to be able to talk to in more detail when she comes. But I'm highlighting this because I'm concerned that it may have been a bit misleading for people to, one part of the minister's announcement was that there will be no change in special education funding for next year. And that's great that the special education portion of our budget, if it doesn't change, fantastic. But please bear in mind that we spend another 20 million on special education from other parts of our budget. So when this 10 million, additional 10 million cut, if it comes, I guess I'm trying to give you a heads up that there's a chance it's going to touch spec ed. Just so people really understand that. I don't want you to come away from reading the news and go, oh, great, spec ed's untouched next year. I don't want you to be surprised. Staff we're working hard on this to look at where we can minimize the impact on kids in classrooms, but it's a substantial amount of money, just so you understand that. And I have a really nice YouTube video there, but I guess it's just too late, so maybe I'm going to ask people to click on it. It's a really great highlight of some work that's happening at one of our high schools with our CPP kids. So please watch that when you're at home, if you haven't already.
All right, please do. And Deidre, please question.
Just a quick question regarding number 3, which you didn't touch on today, changes to self-contained classes, which concerns many of us sitting around here this evening. Are you prepping us for number 4 and just giving us a bit of a heads up, which says that there's changes made to all of these programs. Some of them are relocated, are opened, and some are closed. Does the board have any idea of where some of these cuts might be happening that they can share or that you can share with us?
So I'll always give you a bit of a what's the word I'm looking for? Thank you, disclaimer. Yeah, that's the word I'm looking for. That pending a budget approval, right? That's all that trustees approve the budget. So ultimately what's funded through all of our budget and programs and services, et cetera, is pending that approval. So at this point, and I guess I'm even hesitant to say a lot because we don't, the government has said that they're going to table the budget in the legislature on April 11th. And then that school boards would be getting their grant. We call it the GSN, the grant for student needs, after that. So we don't anticipate receiving it until probably mid to late April. So until we actually get our budget and really see the numbers, my disclaimer is there to say I can't sort of promise anything until we get that, right? And then even then, staff propose a budget to trustees that trustees then have to decide. So now back to your question. That's after my long disclaimer. At this time, we're not proposing we won't be, I hope, proposing any changes as a result of the budget. That these are the changes that I'm going to share with you. I can't share yet because in some cases, schools or especially parents don't know yet that there's a change. But those changes that are there are the result of either we don't have enough students anymore to run that class, or we have more students and therefore we need to add a class, or where the kids are coming from has changed and therefore we relocate. So that's sort of a normal process. And for those of you who've been at CBAC for a while, I come and bring those to you every year so that you're aware of what's going on. But it's not foreshadowing around the budget.
Follow-up?
Yeah, just one question. Obviously, there's going to be places where you're going to have to find that 10.7 million. Us being an advisory committee, will we be made aware or consulted prior to anything committed changes by the board, or will it just be things that are happening and then we're kind of told what's happened?
So that's why we proposed 2 meetings in May. So for Roxanne and Nicole to come and share, it's really going to be more of an information session, that first one. The budget's quite complex. I'm sure you can appreciate that. $700 million plus. There's a lot of aspects to it. She's going to focus in on the special education grants and the things that fund special education here and help you understand a bit of our current state and then what the changes are and therefore what those impacts will be. That'll be her focus when she's here in May, the first meeting in May. My suggestion, we still have to talk about this, Danielle and Joanna and I, but my suggestion for our May meeting, because we're late in this process now, right, because of how late it's coming from the province. My suggestion for our May meeting is that we maybe strip down the agenda a bit so that we can really focus on budget. So since we've already had a May meeting, maybe we don't do some of our typical once a month things and just have time to really dig in on budget. So that's the intent, is that we bring to you here the things that we're proposing through that budget process with trustees. Tell us what you think. We want to hear that input.
We need to wrap up this discussion.
Sorry, just one quick last question. Where Judy had stated earlier about receiving the information prior to the meeting, we have a lot of great minds sitting around here, and perhaps if we had the information prior to, we could come up with some creative thoughts or alternatives that might not be considered by the board that us being part of our groups could put forth as being options. Just a thought.
Sure. I'll just say we'll do that as best we can. If you can appreciate that between receiving the grant and to then come out with the numbers and all the impact. I know our business services, staff, budget, and accounting work their tails off. So as fast as they can, and we'll get things to you as much as in advance, but it's some pretty complex work that they work very hard just to get to us. Because then we need staff to contemplate what we've got, etc. So for sure, we'll do the best we can.
All right, thank you. So moving on, conscious of time, it's 9:20. We'll go around a table for association reports. Starting with Lucille, Christina. Lisa.
Hi. I attended the PIC meeting last week for the first time. It was fantastic. And a couple of things actually came from that. First of all, Erin Marsh, do I have her name right? Walsh.
Sorry, Lisa, can I just clarify, are you providing an association update or talking about the committee's reports?
I am. I'm jumping to 5.4.
Okay, all right.
Okay, so let's go to 5.2, association reports. I'm so sorry. See, it's 20 after 9. I'm like, so in terms of Autism Ontario, I did reach out to them today and just asked if there was anything that they wanted me to bring forward. And so I'm going to read what I was provided. Autism Ontario's Raise the Flag campaign, through a simple act of raising a flag, unites families, schools, communities, government, and professionals in recognizing World Autism Awareness Day and brings to light struggles and triumphs of people on the autism spectrum. Through this initiative, we are building stronger, more inclusive communities for people with autism spectrum disorder. We are highlighting the work done throughout the province and the work that still needs to be done to ensure that children, youth, and adults living with ASD are provided with means to achieve quality of life. thank you for being part of this momentous day with us. World Autism Awareness Day falls today. And thank you very much for acknowledging that at the beginning of the meeting. Okay, thanks.
Okay, we'll move on to Learning Disabilities Association of Ontario.
Okay, Learning Disabilities Association of Halton, not Ontario, it's all right, is now actually Learning Disabilities Association of Halton Hamilton. So we are officially launched by LDAO at our conference, and we have a satellite office now open in Hamilton, and we have a new logo and website to match. So it's LDAHH. We continue to provide programs for reading, technology, and social skills. We have approximately 20 Orton-Gillingham students in our Orton-Gillingham remedial instruction with a wait list. Our parent support workshops continue to be popular, providing instruction in advocacy, IEPs, and IPRCs, and everything in between. For parents who continue to need support during school meetings, we have two resource facilitators to help. And lastly, our 8th annual Solutions for Learning Conference, Breakthrough to Excellence, was well received at the Burlington Holiday Inn on March 28th. The conference provided delegates with a keynote address and 12 breakout sessions, as well as a delicious lunch and 2 nutrition breaks. I haven't read the evaluations yet, but I didn't hear a negative comment all day. So we're pleased with the results.
Okay, thank you. Association for Bright Children.
We do have our ABC Ontario's annual provincial family event, which is at the TIFF Festival Tower on April 14th from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. So if anybody has any twice exceptional children and you wanted to attend, registration is now on. We also had an event at the Ontario Science Centre, which was well attended and went over quite well.
Thank you. Halton Down Syndrome Association.
Just a reminder, I think I mentioned last time we're having a World Down Syndrome Day contest like we do every year, the digital media contest. Lots of schools in Halton have signed up. We're excited. The deadline for submissions is April 16th. And I think this year I'd love to share the winner video. We've had some great submissions in the past, and we'll share that with you when we have the results.
Okay, and I see Melissa's not here. Do we have an alternate for Easter Seals? No. Okay. I think that covered all the associations. Have I missed anybody? Voice? Oh, sorry, Judy.
So May is Speech and Hearing Awareness Month, and Voice does a Dress Loud Day. So I just had a question, because we've never really done this through the board. Is there any way, does the board actually make an announcement, or is there any way to have a day assigned for that, or?
If you have material that you'd like us to share, we'd happily do that. We do that with other days and months and events as well.
Okay, and then Voice also has their annual conference the May 4th weekend coming.
Okay, thank you. And we'll go to Trustee Margot Shuttleworth for trustee reports.
Okay, a couple of things just to quickly go over. Hopefully it won't take 5 minutes. As Mark has alluded to, we're continuing to hope for clarity in much of the provincial changes that have been taking place. Our chair has written letters to both our MPP and Minister of Education in trying to get some responses for them to give us some clarity as to what's going on. We also have had consultation with the Catholic School Board. I know that our chair and vice chair met with them, and they are looking at areas where they can work together as two boards. Let's see, boundary reviews. There was a boundary review that has been determined in Oakville. You can look on the website to find information about that. And there is a boundary review that continues for South Burlington. Student trustee elections are coming up on the 23rd of April. There are, I think, 9 candidates left to have pulled out. Work continues at Nelson and MM Robinson as far as the consolidation of those two schools, and we are shifting budgeting to try and make sure that the timeline for the construction that's going on is as seamless and unobtrusive to the learners and the community as it possibly can be. Finally, on our agenda for tomorrow, we have a review of policies and bylaws, and in those is the Special Education Committee advisory policy. So what we would like you to do is we're just giving you a heads up so that you can have a look through that document, and if you do have any feedback, we would welcome that. And we'll bring it up at the next Siak meeting. Is that right? If I can remember my dates? Yes? And that's it.
Okay, and moving on to are there any HDSB committee updates? So that would be PIC, equity. Yes?
Sorry, not PIC and equity, but I see at the bottom it is the Nelson Bateman integration update, and I have been in contact with both principals from those schools. They have tried to have a communication across the schools. When they are having parent council meetings, they are inviting each other's school councils to come. And in speaking with the Nelson principal the other day, they're hoping that it will become that it's not an invitation, it's just the council, that's their council date, so that it's a shared council meeting for the last year of having both schools open, so that it's not a visiting each other, it's just part of the natural progression. They also did work together at one of the last professional development meetings. Nelson, Bateman, and Central staff got together to work collaboratively to look at best practices and moving forward together.
Okay, and I'll provide an update for the Accessibility Committee. So some of our senior staff from Facilities, the Sustainability Coordinator, and from Special Education will be attending an Accessibility Boot Camp workshop, which will be looking at review design. So it's looking specifically at our design in relation to the codes and assessing the accessibility and inclusivity of that design. Also, a couple of key procedures are administrative procedures are under review, and that's accessibility standards for customer service and accessibility service communication protocol. So I believe we are at the end of our agenda. Sorry. Oh,
one more.
Oh, one more. Lucille?
I would just like to, I see you must pick. I would like to volunteer to be a Siak rep on that committee. I don't know whether this is the right time to do it, or if I miss the meeting. Because there was that, I wanted to be on that committee and also on the Nelson Bateman Reintegration Committee. Who do I speak to?
Yeah, you were, I think, absent when we did the sign-ups.
Yes, I was.
Yeah. So who was on those committees now? You said PIC and the integration,
PIC and
right?
the Nelson Robert Bateman integration.
So Lisa's on PIC. So I think the intent is that we have one rep.
Okay, so then that's fine.
Well, some of these committees are pretty big. So really, I guess between you and Lisa, you could decide, because I think Lisa signed up for quite a few because no one else did, right? So. Microphone? Yes.
No, I went to my first meeting last week, and I'd like to stay, but maybe if there's a time that I can't go, could I contact you? Do you want to be like an alternate? Is that okay? Just a suggestion. Okay.
And then do we have an integration committee rep? Do we have an integration committee rep?
Well, I'm on it because I'm the trustee for Nelson. So,
right.
But I'm not. I don't necessarily think that I am or could be considered the rep. So I'd be happy to have company.
Okay.
And then with PIC, I would think that they'd be happy to have more than one person at a PIC.
We can check. I know it's not multiple from all, because they have reps from a number of places, right? Mm-hmm. So, but let's.
I would just
we can check, but if you can share the information around.
I really don't mind, but those were my
Top two.
Yeah.
They don't want to be, but I've seen it both, both of them have been.
Yeah.
So it's one
Yeah.
of me.
Can you share the integration dates with Lou?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry, I just didn't know when I.
Yeah. No. Yeah. You were away when we did that. So thanks for speaking up.
Okay, so our very final agenda item. Yes?
We have one more committee. We have other committees. So the equity and inclusive education.
Ask if there was any updates for those. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I thought we were still at accessibility. Okay, so Equity and Inclusive Education Advisory Committee met last week at the Milton Learning Center. The main focus was a presentation by Rosanna Biseglia, who is the school board's research specialist, and she was providing us an update on a draft survey called Identity-Based Data Collection. When the survey does go out, all students will complete and submit the survey. That's it.
Okay, thank you. That's it then? All right. Final item. This is where the chair, Mark, and I would like your input into some potential future agenda items. So if there's anything you have in mind, now would be the time to raise it. So maybe we'll go around the table, and if you have a suggestion, please voice it. All right, we'll start with Lucille. Nope. Okay. Christina? That's okay. Diane? Margot?
I have one thing. I think it would be nice to take a look at how, coming back to the beginning of the meeting when we were looking at questions, looking at how we create a more welcoming, maybe, environment. I don't know if that's the right way to sound, but just looking at how, I don't know, the image that we have maybe is what it is that I'm thinking. Because that was something that kind of we talked about. Allison was my co-champion in that, she was saying.
Judy? All right, Deirdre? Yep. Lisa? Okay, Sophia? Allison? Diane? Heather? Tracy?
So sorry, the procedure? The Siak procedure?
Yes.
Yes, so I've excerpted it. I'm emailing it to you in case you want to circulate that. Yeah.
Okay, so that's great. So going forward, keep in mind that Diane and Mark and I will welcome suggestions from you to help shape our future agendas so that we get to address topics of interest. And, you know, if you want to learn more about what we're doing at the school board relevant to special education or students, that'll be the time. Okay, so thank you very much, and meeting adjourned.